So let us start with the Guru Vandana. Guru Brahma Gurur Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sada Shiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my salutations, my respects to my Guru, Sri Narasimha Prabhuji, and to my parents who introduced me to this path, who kindled the interest in spirituality in me. And of course, I thank Srimati Vani and Sri Vasuji and Vani's parents, Krishnamurti ji and Rukmini ji, who have been running this, doing this Jnana Yajna for more than 4 decades. It's a fantastic opportunity and forum for seekers and speakers like us. Really, I mean, just imagine the kind of the synchronicity is amazing. You know, so many things have to fall into place. So when we say Sadashiva Samarambham, Shankaracharya Madhyama, all the truths we speak about in this forum has come down from none other than Sadashiva, or in some traditions Narayana Samarambha. Imagine, it is from the source itself and through the Guru Parampara with Shankaracharya in the middle, Shankaracharya Madhyama, and Asmadacharya Paryantam, and my own personal Guru Sri Narasimha Prabhuji. And to be able to articulate such beautiful truths and timeless eternal truths, and connected with all of the like-minded people, Atma Bandhus like you, through technology. I mean, sometimes when I think of the magnitude and magnificence of all this, I'm speechless. If all the time I think about it, then I would be, of course, liberated by now. But sometimes when it hits me so strongly, because we have gone through a lot of programs of the Guru Purnima, and that whole the mood is still with me, and I really appreciate the synchronicity is the only word I can think of, you know, which has brought all of us together, and we are able to have this collective experience. And the topic for today is about avatars, very, very dear to my heart, because all of us, I'm sure, most of us at least, have grown up on stories of avatars. And even if we have not, we always idealize nobility, right? We give our children noble names, you know, with adjectives which talk about noble qualities, and we aspire ourselves to be noble, our children to be noble, the society to be noble, our friends to be noble, have some qualities which keeps us apart from the crowd. And that is why we grow up idealizing our heroes. We have our idols and heroes, and even as children, we are, we grew up on, of course, as the Indians and Hindus, we have grown up on the stories of our Puranas and all that. Even otherwise, in the Western culture, we have our Superman and Spider-Man and Catwoman and Avengers or Iron Man, all superheroes, who have got extraordinary powers, and they are able to zoom in at the right moment and rescue people, save them from calamity, save the world from peril. All these qualities, we idealize such qualities because there is that there's a feel-good factor, and it gives us security to know that we are being looked after. There is help at hand, and some noble soul is going to come and help us get across this problem, or even and ultimately from the jivana cycle of birth and death and all that. So avatars, long before the Supermans and Iron Mans of the world, we had our own Supermen and women. Our whole Sanatana Dharma is based on this concept of the supreme being, who's Nirguna. And then the Saguna, who's the all-powerful Ishvara who created the world. And then the avatars who come down to the world to help, help us in everything. So let us take a look at what these avatars, several aspects of these avatars which have been running in my head for a long time, and have loved reading up about it and researching about it. And then I have a presentation to make. I'm very excited. I don't know about you. I'm very happy to present this today because it really, really, it has moved me a lot. Okay, so be with me when I present this for you. Yes. All right. So here we are with the mystery and magnificence of avatars. To start with, yeah, this is a primary question you can ask. Why should I believe in the avatara theory? Okay, I am not from your background. I am not, I was not particularly interested in your scriptures or whatever. And I think it's all a waste of time. I don't have to believe in this. Perfectly valid argument. However, I want to clarify here that all my belief in the avatara theory, belief is a word which I use very carefully, because not carefully, with reluctantly, because there is no proper word to express what we have, the Sanatana Dharmis think about their avatars. Why should I believe in the avatara theory? Simple, because the Sri Krishna himself has said that in the Bhagavad Gita, that he's an avatar and he has come down to earth to save, to protect dharma. So Krishna has said it, so I believe it. Then you can very well ask, why should I believe Krishna? I don't know him personally. Why should I take whatever he says seriously, right? So that's also a very valid question. But in our Sanatana Dharma, there is a pedagogy of teaching, the Vedanta or whatever it is, and the basic qualification of a seeker or a mumukshu or a jignasu, the one who wants to know the truth about the mystery of the world and creation and the purpose of life and all that. The basic qualification is the belief or trust. Belief is again not the right word. The trust in the vakyas of the Shrutis and Smritis and Vedas. This is called as the Apta Vakya. Apta Vakya means a very, very dear, close promise given by someone who is very close to us, or one who is very trusted. Okay. So, for example, a mother, like a baby trusts the mother. It's just trust, it is not belief. A belief has got connotations of being blind and all that. So it is not belief, it is a trust. In fact, in Sanskrit, it's a very beautiful word called Shraddha, which is, there is no actual word for it in English. You ought to have the Shraddha in the path you are taking. You ought to have the Shraddha in your teacher. The Shraddha, in this case, for seekers of liberation, of moksha, and the Vedas are said to be the mother. Like how a child trusts the mother. The child doesn't have to be told who your mother is, because it instinctively knows who the mother is. But the mother tells the child, this is your father, and the child believes the mother implicitly. I mean, the child doesn't even question. It doesn't even occur to the child to question that my mother is not correct or something like that. So this is called as Shraddha in Sanskrit. So the Vedas, as you all know, the Shrutis, they are called the Shrutis. They are Apaurushaya. That means they have come directly from the source. That is why it's untouched by human mind, and it is uncorrupted. It is pure knowledge which has passed down through the Guru Parampara. Therefore, it is called the Aptavakya, or it's even called Shabda Pramana, the Pramana of the Vedas, the Shrutis and the Smritis. So we know the Shrutis are that which are heard or directly come down from the source, and Smritis are, you can pin down an author to them, like for example, the Puranas and the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, Ramayana, they are all the Smritis, because we know the author of these of these great works. However, the authors themselves are jnanis, and they have got that directly from the source. So this is the Aptavakya of the Vedas, and Bhagavad Gita is an Aptavakya of Bhagwan Sri Krishna himself, and in which, in chapter 4, in the Jnana Yoga, Sri Krishna says, I have come down on earth, I have been here before, I'll be here later, and I'll come down every time there is a problem with the world, right? So we believe in the Avatara theory. So let's establish that. And the Shrutis and Smritis, of course, were given by the great seer, the sage Veda Vyasa. And he himself was a enlightened soul, and he has given us the Smritis. So we believe in the Aptavakya of Sri Krishna and Sri Veda Vyasa, the Upanishads, the Vedas, and so we accept that avatars, there is something called an avatara, and there's a lot more to avatara than we know. Okay, so the whole of this today's talk will be based on what Sri Krishna has said in the Bhagavad Gita, because that is the major scripture which talks about avatars, apart from, of course, the Vishnu Purana, which has all the avatars listed. All right, so next, let us go here. What are or who is an avatar? What is an avatara, or who is an avatara? So it is said that Maya has two products. One is us, Jivatmas, who don't have a clue why we are here. The Maya produces Jivatmas. And sometimes when Maya is very happy with us or takes pity on us, Maya comes out. She comes out with a special edition, and they are called avatars. You know, they are divine special manifestations of the divine. You can call them as special manifestations. We are like regular assembly line productions. We are being rolled out every day, but these special manifestations come once in a way, with a divine purpose. And who is this? What is this divine manifestation? You can call this as distilled form of Saguna Brahman. So now we all know that there is that Nirguna Brahman who is the only reality behind everything that is seen or experienced, or heard. That's the only reality. And from the Nirguna Brahman, we have the Saguna Brahman, who is the manifestation of the Nirguna Brahman, the Saguna Brahman, which is this world, or we call him the Ishvara. The Ishvara, the God of the universe is called Ishvara. This Ishvara is in the manifest world, is the manifest world. And the distilled form of this Ishvara is an avatara, meaning all the noble qualities of what we think is God is in this avatara. Like we have our gods like Vishnu or Shiva or Ganesha or Shakti or Muruga or whatever it is. So they all have divine qualities. They have extraordinary qualities. They have all the noble qualities that one would aspire for. Plus they are very potent. All these qualities are there in a person, in a avatara who is the Saguna Brahman in human form. That is called an avatar. So it is not just as if only in Sanatana Dharma we have avatars. Most religions in the sense, not just the, it is not based on, not that only one particular type of people have these avatars concept. So we have Jains who have special people, or Sikhism has their gurus. They don't call them avatars, but they are revered as enlightened souls, and they are worshipped, right? So Jains have them, and Sikhs have them. When Islam has their saints, the Sufis have their saints, and Christianity of course has their own Jesus, who is an avatara, nothing less than an avatara. So this concept of an avatara is all pervading. Everybody, all human beings want noble people to be among them, and so all of us have these avatars amongst us through the ages, without any exception. And is the avatara a limited edition, like how Maya says it's a limited edition, only sometimes they come? It is limited, but there are innumerable. We think there are only 10 avatars. In in our tradition, we talk of the Dashavataras of Vishnu. That is the main prominent avatars of Vishnu, which are extolled in the Vishnu Purana. And it also says the Vishnu Purana, in fact, talks of 24 avatars of Lord Vishnu, and not just in human form. We know that every child, of our child knows that Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, all the forms of the divinity takes any form which is suitable for the situation to bring us out of misery. So Asankhya, innumerable avatars, and they're not just in human form. This is the general information we can gather about the avatara theory. And then, how is an avatara born? Before that, we have to see or understand how is a jiva born. Okay, the difference between a jiva and avatara, if it's clear to us, then we can go to the next question. So how is a jiva born? I think most of us are familiar with the process of Panchikarana. Panchikarana is the mixture of the 5 elements, the 5 basic elements in the universe, which form the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body of the human being, of the jiva. Okay, so basically what we need to know is the jiva, or the human body. Let us just stick to the body as of now, because we are talking about birth, and what is born is what we can see is the gross body. So the gross body, as we know, has a mixture of 5 main bhutas, panchabhutas. So how is it? This is very, we have been saying that, panchabhuta, but they're in a very particular mixture in the body, like the space, the element of space is 50%. The 4 other elements are in a certain 12.5%. The other 50% is made of the 4. So the element of water is also the major element will be 50%. The rest of the 4 will be in the next 50%. Like this, the mixture of these ways, very scientific combination of these 5 elements make the body of the jiva. Okay, and we know how this food cycle, it's actually a food cycle. When the body is the prana goes away from the body, it's either cremated or buried, in which all the elements go back to the atmosphere, right? And so then it goes up as avi, or as it goes up, it is avi agi mele hogutte. Then it is coagulated in the clouds, and it comes down as rain, and then it fertilizes the earth, and the plant, the food is produced, the food is had by the man, and the Y chromosome, is responsible, along with the X chromosome, for the baby to be born. So this is how the general, it is very, very basic explanation of how a body takes birth on earth. This is how a jiva is born. According to this, even science agrees that this is how the body is composed of the five elements. But apart from this, in our Puranas, we come to know that between the time when the body is cremated or burnt, and it goes to the goes to the universe, merges with the atmosphere, and it comes down again as rain. There is a whole lot of things which happen with the subtle body and the causal body of the jiva. The subtle body means the gross body is gone, but still the subtle body, meaning the mind and the intellect and the ahankara, they are all together. They have to go somewhere. They are carried by the prana, and according to the karma of the jiva, or the merits and demerits, or the papa or the punya of the jiva, it goes to either the higher lokas, 7 lokas, or to the lower lokas. Okay. Then when there is a lot of technicality which goes into how the jiva finds the right time to come back down to earth and get another body. So again, a very, very basic explanation, and have really not explained it the way it should be, because it's a very technical subject. But from what I understand is the jiva has a process of getting this gross body in this manner. Why are we talking about all this? Because we want to understand how an avatara is born. Does the avatara go through these processes is the question here, right? Not at all. The avatara's birth, how is the avatara's body manifested? It is shrouded in mystery. Why? See, this is of course our famous Sri Krishna Bhagavanta. Everybody knows how he was born. He was born in the jail. Very mystical stories, around the birth of Sri Krishna Bhagavan. No need to go into that because we know that it is mystical, right? And then even the four Rama, Lakshmana, Shatrughna, Bharata, these children were also not conceived in a regular manner, isn't it? They had to, Dasharatha and his queens had to do a Putra Kameshri Yagna, and they had to eat a fruit, and a whole lot of mysteries surrounding it. It is not a regular kind of conception. They're all very mystical, right? This is how Vyasa was born. It is said that his father Parashara and that lady Satyavati, they were the couple who brought forth this Vyasa. But even though they were in a relationship, this Vyasa was manifested. There was no regular conception as such. He was manifested as a 16-year-old Vatu, right there on the boat in the middle of the river. He was manifested as a Vatu, as a brahmachari, whose Upanayanam was already over. So that is the kind of mystery surrounding the birth of an avatara. Even if the baby is, if an avatar is born, his birth is surrounded by mystical events. For example, this is the birth of the Buddha. The baby, the Buddha, when he was born, the newborn took steps, started walking, and under every step of his, a lotus flower bloomed, declaring to the world that here is an enlightened soul who's been born. So like this, you think of all these avatars, whomever we can think of, they have these amazing stories to tell us, and the avatars, we can say that they manifest and they unmanifest. You cannot say an avatara is born. They manifest, they appear, and then they disappear. Why do they disappear? Because it is not exactly, this is Kabir, this is the birth of Kabir, the great saint Kabir Das. He was also just found, he just appeared in the middle of a lake on a lotus, and he was adopted by his parents. So these are some of this is Shirdi Sai Baba. Nobody knows from where this great saint came from, and nobody knows how he just vanished one day into thin air, right? So these are the kind of things. This is the Patanjali. See, not just these, some of them, we like Rama and Krishna are Purnavataras. We call them the Purnavataras, the complete, complete form of the Saguna Brahman. But these are Anshas. Patanjali is the Ansha of Adishesha, it is said. They are Anshas of the God. And even this birth of Patanjali and all these saints are very, very shrouded in mystery. And they manifest and they unmanifest. Because one cannot say with certainty what happened to the body of the Avatara after it was, it finished its work. For example, it is said that Krishna was hit by an arrow by that archer or whatever. But there is not much more about it. And Lord Rama walked into the Sarayu river, just disappeared. And Shankaracharya, he just disappeared into the Himalayas. Like this. So nobody can say what happens to these avatars after their time is done. Then again, we are still with this question, how is an avatara born? So in Vaishnava Siddhanta, it's a little different from Advaita Siddhanta. Advaita Siddhanta, of course, there is only one supreme Brahman and everything else is Maya. That's it, finish. But in Vaishnava Siddhanta, they take their gods very seriously, right? Their God is a personal God, and they take great pains to describe how this God has come about. So what Vaishnava Siddhanta says is that Maya ordinary Maya of what we know as Maya is Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. All the creatures born out of Maya are endowed with these three gunas, the Sattva, the Rajas, and the Tamo gunas, isn't it? So all of us are a combination of the Sattva and Rajas and Tamas in various proportions. So what about an avatara? What the Vaishnava Siddhanta says here is, it talks about in Sat Chit Ananda, the Vaishnava Siddhanta talks about Sat Chit and Ananda. It says Sat, which is means existence in English, if you want to say. Sat means existence, has got a very peculiar power called the Sandhini Shakti. The Sandhini Shakti. Sandhini Shakti is, Sat is the power to manifest. Okay, the Sat is the power to manifest, right? And then Chit. What is Chit? Chit is the Samvit Shakti, which means it's the power to know everything. Chit is the Samvit Shakti, which is the power to know everything. Sat is existence, Chit is consciousness, so it makes sense. Sat is how to it manifests things, and Chit has the power to know everything, the knowing principle. And Ananda. Ananda is called the Hladini Shakti. Ahlada, the bliss, this is the power of divine bliss. These are the three powers of Maya, says Vaishnava Siddhanta. The power to manifest, the power to know, and the power of bliss. So what happens? This in the Vaishnava Siddhanta, this Hladini Shakti is very, very critical. She is the Maya, she is the Shakti, right? She is what she does. She appears. The Hladini Shakti, with the Sat and Chit, with the help of Sat and Chit, she appears as the divine consort of the avatara, like Sita or Radha or Rukmini, all the divine cons, or the Ma Shakti, the mother. The Maya Shakti with the Hladini Shakti, she appears as the divine feminine, and along with her, she is the person. She brings with her great Krupa Shakti, with the power of her grace, she brings the avatara to us. This is how the Vaishnava Siddhanta describes how an avatara is born. The Hladini Shakti, or the grace of the Divine Mother, causes the avatara to be born, and she accompanies the avatara as the consort. This is what very interesting, how different Siddhantas describe this wonderful phenomena. And another interesting, wonderful thing is the avatara has a Mayika body. What is the meaning of this? So we have a gross body. Like we saw, we have a gross body made up of the 5 elements, the Panchabhutas, which have gone through a process with the union of two, the male and female amshas, and then the body is formed. Now we have seen that the avatara does not have to go through that process, and the avatara has a Mayika body. And how do we know? Is it just blind conjecture? No, because in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 and verse 6, Shri Krishna Paramatma's Apta Vakya says that Ajo apisan avyayatma. Okay, Ajo, I am unborn, and avyayatma, I am imperishable. I am always there. I am ageless and I am deathless. Bhutanam Ishwaropi. I am although I am unborn and imperishable, I am the Bhutanam I am Ishwara of all the Bhutas. I am the Lord of all living entities. Okay? Prakrutim Swam Adhishtaya. What I do is I take control of Prakriti. Adhishtaya. I take Prakruti under my control, and Sambhavami Mayatmaya Mayaya. I am born out of my own Maya, my own Yoga Maya. So the avatara does not require all these laboratory processes to be born like other people. So I am unborn and imperishable, but still I take control of all the powers of the Maya, and I appear in this world by virtue of Yoga Maya, my divine power. So this is what Sri Krishna himself says, that how the Mayika body of the avatara is just manifested. So we have always been, we have wondered I have wondered as a child, how did the avatar appear? He just came. See, all our Puranas talk about this wonderful manifestation and unmanifestation power of all these people. And Triloka Sancharis, they come here like Narada is a Triloka Sanchari. He can appear and disappear anywhere in the world. So they have been given this power by Yogamaya. The Mother Maya herself has given them this power, because let us see why she has given them such a power, right? Okay. So why is an avatara born? Again, let us understand why is a jiva born. When we understand why a jiva is born, we can go on to understand why an avatara is born. So why a jiva is born? I would say clueless. I have no idea why I am born. But thanks to repeated, listening to the Vedas and the Puranas, to the Guru, the guidance of the Sadguru and the meditation and study circle, exposure to all this knowledge, we now know that the jiva is born because of the prarabdha karma, right? Prarabdha karma is the karmas, the papas and punyas we have accumulated over lifetimes. We have generated experiences. We are experiencing as we are talking. We experience a lot of things. So this is the reason why a jiva is born. It takes a body to get rid of the karmas. But while get rid of the karmas, we are also accumulating karmas and therefore generating more karma to be born again. So this is the jiva is born because it is helpless, absolutely not in control. We are born helplessly out of our own, ignorance. The jiva is born. It is not in control at all, right? The jiva is absolutely not in control. I don't remember saying, I want to be born here on such and such a date with so and so parents, with such an environment. No, nothing. It's all, there's a joke which goes around, right? Karma, in the restaurant of karma, you don't order the menu. There is no menu. You are just served what you deserve. So that is what happens to a jiva who is born. We are just served what we deserve. We have no business to ask why, because we are ignorant. And the scriptures, thankfully, after the jiva is born helplessly, the scriptures very kindly tell us that, my dear child, you are here for realizing the 4 purusharthas of life. What are the 4 purusharthas? Dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Let us keep dharma aside for a bit, because that's what we do all the time. So artha and kama take pride of place in our lives. Artha is to earn money. Why do we earn money? Because of kama, because we have desires to fulfill. We have got a lot of needs. We have endless needs which we keep fulfilling, and like Rakta Bija Asura, the kamas keep multiplying, and so we keep earning, and we have to feed that asura. We have to feed the asura called kama, and therefore we have to earn money. And while in the process of fulfilling the purusharthas of artha and kama, we are generating more and more karma. And then the scriptures tell us, when a kind soul comes and tells us, okay, fine, you go ahead and you do your artha and kama, but at least do it in a dharmic manner, So there are guidelines laid out by our Vedas, the Shrutis and Smrutis. They tell us how to dharmically go about earning your living and fulfilling your desires. So the jiva has to go through this. And finally, there's the part of moksha also, which the jiva, if it's lucky, will come to know about it later. Talking of karma, there's a very, very interesting. So this is a picture of Janaka Maharaja. This is strictly not the Avatara story, but I would like to recall this beautiful story relating to Janaka Maharaja about how karma, very loosely, very casually and very often we use the term karma, karma, karma. But I doubt, do I really understand the depth to which this karma operates in my life? When I heard the story of this Janaka Maharaja regarding this karma, actually it hit me really hard. every moment I'm generating karma through my thoughts, words, and actions. So, to recall this beautiful story, Janaka Maharaja, as we all know, was a Brahmajnani. Okay, his guru was Yajnavalkya, and also he had Ashtavakra as his guru, and he was a realized Maharaja. He was a Rajarshi. He was a Jivan Mukta. This Janaka Maharaja, his friend, his Apta Mitra once told him, Janaka, you're a very lucky bugger man, really. You're enlightened. You're a Maharaja. You have a beautiful city in Mithila. Your kingdom is so beautiful, it is so prosperous. And your mother is Sita Mata. Your daughter is Sita. She is goddess Lakshmi herself. Your son-in-law is Lord Rama. That is Vishnu himself. I mean, how much more? And your guru is Ashtavakra. How much more lucky can a man get, man? Really? I mean, amazing. You have everything. It's how can a one person have all this punya, coming together in one lifetime like that? It's impossible. So Janaka also started thinking about it, and he said, what is my friend is saying is true. How did I come to be so lucky? I see so many people who are suffering in life, going through all sorts of nonsense. Poor fellows, either they don't have peace, they don't have money, they don't have power, they don't have, if they have one, they don't have another. But in my life, there's everything, bharpur, I'm overflowing with all the, good things that one can hope for. And I am also liberated. So what he did was he went to his guru and asked him, you please tell me, my friend was asking me how I got to be so lucky. Please tell me how what did I deserve? What did I do to deserve this? So his guru said, okay, you start walking west, okay, and you will find a sage by sunset. You will find a yogi who is eating grass. He knows the answer. So Janaka starts walking towards the west, and he walks and walks and walks and walks and walks, and then until the sun sets. And just as the sun is setting, as his guru had told him, he finds a sage who is eating grass, a yogi who is eating grass. So the moment the yogi sees Janaka, he says, I know why you have come here. I have the answer to your question too, but I am not going to tell you. You have to go again, walk towards the west. You walk. Again, the next day, when the sun sets, you will find another yogi who is eating ashes, and he is going to give you the answer. So Janaka says, okay, fine. Then he starts walking again. He walks and walks and walks. And as promised by this yogi, he finds another yogi. By sunset, he finds, and he's eating ashes. Okay. So Janaka, the moment, same story repeats. The moment the yogi sees Janaka, he said, I know why you're here. I know the answer to your question, but I cannot give you the answer. Again, you have to walk. You walk towards west, and as the sun sets, you'll come to a village, and you will come to a house where there's a child, a newborn, a house where they're celebrating the birth of a newborn. You go into that house and talk to the newborn. That newborn will give you the answer. This Janaka is stupefied. A newborn who can talk. He's very curious now. Though he's tired walking for 2 days, he says, okay, I'm going to do that. And he walks and walks and walks and walks. And as promised by that sage yogi who was eating ashes, he comes to a village. There's indeed a house where the child who is born, a newborn, is crying. He hears the cries of a newborn, and there's great celebration happening in the house. And he goes to the house and he says, may I see your child? Of course, the householders are very thrilled. Janaka Maharaja himself has walked into my house, humble abode, and asking to see the child, to bless the child. And so they take him to the child. And so the moment the baby sees Janaka, it starts talking. Yes. And the baby says, yes, I know, Maharaja, King Janaka, why you're here. And I have the answer to your question. Long ago, there was a family a very, very poor family, a widow. She had four sons. She had four sons. She was extremely poor, and she had to struggle a lot to feed her children. And one evening, she just had four rotis, four chapatis, to give her to one each to her child. And she had just distributed one each to all the four boys, and she was starving, and she was sitting and crying. Why? A guest entered the house. A guest entered the house and asked the woman, "I'm hungry. I'm a hungry traveler. Please give me something to eat." The poor, helpless widow said, "I'm sorry, my dear Atiti. Whatever I had, I have already distributed to my children. I don't have personally to give you anything. You can ask my children if they can part with their portion of the food. You can take it." So the guest asked the elder child, "I'm hungry. I want to eat." So the elder child said, "What? I've been hungry for 3 days and I have to eat now. If I give you my chapati, what shall I eat? Shall I eat grass?" And so the guest asked the second child, "Will you give your chapati?" The child says, "No, I'm extremely hungry. If I part with my chapati, what shall I eat? Shall I eat ashes?" And so the guest asked the third child, "Will you give my chapati? Will you give me my chapati?" So the child was very, 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 very hungry, and it started crying. And the child said, "No, I will not give you my chapati. If I don't eat this chapati, I'm going to die." Okay. And so this newborn child who was talking to Janaka said, "I was that third child who said, you have already met the last two, the previous elder brothers of mine. One was the yogi who was eating the grass. The other was the yogi who was eating ashes. And I am the third child who said, I'm going to die. I know the moment I am born, I have been doing that for ages now, several births. I am born and I die. I am born and I die. Even now that I have come, I have told you my story, I'm going to die." And the fourth child, surprise, no surprise, it is you, O Janaka. The fourth child, the guest had asked the fourth child, "Will you give me your chapati?" Before even the guest had asked, the child had given in the guest the chapati to eat. And because the child was already starving and malnourished and he couldn't eat his food that day, the child had perished and died in that previous birth. So this child is now Janaka, who is blessed with all the splendors of the world. Anything you ask for, Janaka had. So this is how karma, I don't know, this is very scary actually, but to drive home the point that karma acts in these subtle manner. So before we ask, why is this happening to me? We have to think. We have done something to deserve this, either good or bad, papa or punya. Sometimes it is not apparent to us why things are happening, but it is there. It's there. It is in stories like this we come to know how our every thought, word, and action can have a bearing on our life, done out of ignorance, right? We say things out of ignorance. We say things. We think carelessly. We don't behave in a very responsible manner. We take our everything for granted, and then we, apart from doing things in ignorance, we also claim I am doing this. That's the worst thing. The doership comes into it, which is why we are stuck with this. Which is why the karma is stuck to us. The doership. Okay, this is the Jiva story of why it is born. Now let's understand what is the Avatara story. Why is an Avatara born? So Avatara has not done any of this Papa Punya business. No, why should the Avatara be born in the first place? If that is a legitimate question to ask, because we cry for help, don't we? We do all sorts of things and then we ask God for help. For every little thing we ask God for help. If we don't, not in so many words, but we look for help from society, from our people, from friends, from all sorts of sources, we look for help. When we are unhappy, we talk to our friend. When we do, We want money, we ask, we go to a bank or whatever it is. We want help all the time. It is impossible to live without the help or cooperation of all the people around us. And when we are really, really, really stuck in a bad situation, we ask God to help us. That is why we have so many rituals. The Lord Swami Vivekananda said, the Hindu is a very peculiar creature. He has got a ritual for every moment of his day, you know. So for everything we talk to God, we ask God for help, which is a wonderful thing. We have a security system which which safeguards us and gives us assurance that help is at hand. God is there to help us. So how do we cry for help? Again, taking the example in the Gita, what Lord Krishna says is, Krishna says, I have got 4 types of devotees. There are 4 types of devotees who come to me for help. One is Artha. Artha means one who is really sad. One who is really sad, who is hopeless. He is miserable in life. He has lost all hope. And he begs God to help. He's an Artha. He's always in trouble. So that Artha, with his bottom of his heart, he calls God for help. And so Krishna is there for such Artis. And Jignasu, the one who wants to know who is God. Who are you, God? Even if you're agnostic or even if you're atheist and you want to know who are you, where are you, God? Like how Hiranyakashipu, he asked, isn't it? Where is God? Huh? So he came from a pillar. He was not exactly a Jignasu, but you ask, you utter God's name and he's there. That is what it is. Jignasu, the one who wants to know what is God, what is life, what is creation, what is liberation. Such a Jignasu is a seeker. For him the avatara is born to help such people. Artharthi is the one who wants his full kamya, all his desires to be fulfilled. He's an Artharthi. Artha is the desire and money, and he is seeking that. So he will, such persons who we do all sorts of yagnas, putra kameshti yagna, job yagna, this yagna, house yagna, all sorts of things. We have got all sorts of desires and we are seeking that from God all the time. So for him, the God is born. And of course, the Gnani, that Krishna says, the Gnani is my most favorite type of jiva. The Gnani wants me for me alone, not for himself. The Gnani is seeking God for the sake of God, not for the sake of his own miserable problems in life. So this is what Krishna says. 4 types of people cry for help, and there he is. Of course, and what does the Avatara do when he is born? He takes them through, he gives all these seekers, his devotees, he gives them the marga of Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. Moksha, of course, we'll take up later. Dharma, Artha and Kama is the most, because, like how Vivekananda said, you first fulfill your basic needs. Unless your basic needs are fulfilled to a certain extent, your mind will not even turn towards moksha. So you do your duties in life, and then after a certain stage, you will turn your mind towards moksha. So again, taking refuge in the Krishna's word. Of course, this is the most famous shloka which almost every Indian now, all over the world, people will know this shloka. Why is an avatara born? And Krishna declares, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati. Glani means decrease. Dharmasya glani. When will dharma decrease? All the time. All the time there are people, especially in these times, in olden times you can say, people, all these rakshasas and demons who were causing trouble, Karti Viryajana types who are always behind sages and destroying their hermitages and killing them and all that. Let's leave that aside. Right now, how is Dharmasya Glani? How is it happening? In these times, we have a lot of non-believers, you can say, very, very logically minded, scientific minded people who don't care much for this process of Dharma, Artha and Kama, and very, very commercial minded, very, very business-like in their transactions. That is dharmasya glani, right? You go to any lens, any lens, you can hurt people, you can do whatever it takes to get your foot in the door. That is, dog eat dog kind of situation. That is a dharmasya glani only. It is such time that God can manifest. So yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam adharma. So when the dharma is reducing, it means adharma is rising. People who misbehave, people fall in moral standards, moral values, that cohesion in the society is lost because of this. When adharma rises in society, all sorts of floods, and the whole universe starts misbehaving when people misbehave. See the COVID situation. Why? Two and a half years of economic activity completely has come to a standstill, isn't it, in the entire world? That is, I don't know whether it's dharma or adharma, but for man, it's been a lot of adharma only has happened, because everything has come to a standstill. So, abhyutanam adharmasya sambhavami yuge uge. Age after day, age, I'll come and set right things for you. That is the promise of the avatara. And paritranaya sadhuna. So I'm here to protect the sadhus. Who are the sadhus? The sadhus are those who are engaged in activities in a dharmic manner. Those who are harmless people who are helping society. These people I want to help. I want to protect. Again, in olden days, sadhus were those who were doing yajnas, and rakshasas were coming and putting mamsas, meat and all in their yajnas and disturbing their this thing. But we can generally say that sadhus are people like us, harmless people. We're just going about our business, not harming people, even mentally or physically. So God is always there to help us. God is always there to help us. Because we are sadhus. So it's very important to be a sadhu. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashayata dushkrutam. Who is the dushkrutas? Again, the ones who disturb society, disturb the balance in society, the equilibrium of society, and or personally also hinder the progress of a jignasu or a gnani or a seeker or a mumukshu. There are people. A very, very bright soul is born in a family which completely restricts that person to follow the path that he or she has chosen. It is said in the Shastras that he is also a dushkruta, because the purpose of life is this liberation, and if somebody is stopped from pursuing that path, then that person is a hindrance. And so he is a dushkruta. His actions are dushkruta. It's a papa. Paritranaya sadhuna vinashayata dushkrutam dharma samsthapanarthaya. This dharma has to be, samsthapana means established, but samsthapana is re-established. It has, throughout our history, we have noted, we have read that there have been periods in really gone. The faith in God, in the Vedas, has gone down drastically. At that point of time, a Shankara is born or a Ramanuja is born to re-establish dharma, to rekindle that faith in God, in the Vedas, in the right path. So all these avatars come in such form among us, and they will re-establish dharma. So we know, of course, the story of Rama, Ravana, Krishna, the Puranas, all the avatars of the Vishnu, they all came to establish dharma. In that first avatara is that Varaha avatara of Vishnu. It sounds like a fairy tale. Yeah, because it's in the Vishnu Purana, and it sounds like a fairy tale. How can a boar lift the earth on its... No. See, the difference between this Puranas and the Vedas is, Vedas, of course, is a very... mystical language. They have told us the truths of life, but the Puranas are told in the form of stories. So they're metaphorical in nature, and so they have to be understood in the right context. So I was reading the other day that this there was a time in the past when the Earth had gone off its orbit. I don't know how is it scientifically It was a scientific magazine. It was sent. There was a time when approximately when the Varaha Avatara is recorded in the Rig Veda, nothing less than the Rig Veda. So no, the Varaha Avatara is in the Vishnu Purana, but in the Rig Veda there is a evidence of, when the Earth goes off its orbit thoda a little bit, and then it was corrected to 23 degrees or whatever it is. So in the ocean of either, some correction was made so that the Earth could again have its correct attributes to be able to sustain life. So I don't know. So all these avatars have done their bit time and again to bring back the balance in Earth. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya dushkritam dharma sansthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Not once, not twice, any time we are in trouble, God will come, right? And so when God comes, when Avatara is born, what happens? He brings with his a lot of grace. In fact, the Avataras, when they are in their form, human form, very rarely are they recognized as an Avatara, isn't it? So later only we say, oh, Rama was an Avatara. I don't know how many of them, apart from one Hanumanta or, one Jambavanta, not many knew that he was an avatar. Or Krishna was actively hated. Forget about recognizing him as an avatar. The moment he was born, people wanted to kill him, isn't it? He was actively hated. So, the grace of an avatar, it is said, is directly received by the people who recognize that avatar, that person as an avatar. So in this case, in the case of Krishna, all his devotees like the Pandavas and the Kunti and Vidura, all these people were directly the recipients of his grace. Arjuna himself, of course, he directly received the Bhagavad Gita from the Avatara. So through Arjuna, the grace has flowed, has been flowing to humanity. So that is how the grace the flows from the Avatara. And it is said that the grace flows in two forms. One as Jignasa. What happens when you come across a Avatara is, the Avatara is, in the sense, a guru who can give you that knowledge is, the Jignasa is kindled in you, at least an agnostic will start thinking on those lines. He wants to know more and more. When you come even the most agnostic person, when he comes in front of God in a temple, in a beautiful serene place, when he sees nature, his mind becomes silent. And for a moment, he will start thinking, what is this? Where has this come from? How did all this manifest? And especially in the presence of a jnani, when the mind becomes silent, even the most agnostic person will start thinking on those lines. The Jignasa is born in him. I want to know more about what makes this person so peaceful. Why is there such a presence around this avatar? The divinity, the pure divinity that is with an avatar or a highly spiritual person itself is grace. That is why it is said, in the Ramana Maharshi's ashram, people go and sit in an ashram. Why? Just to absorb the atmosphere and get the grace. That is the grace of an avatar. So a Jignasa is born in you. An inquiry is, it spontaneously an inquiry comes in you, and you're interested to know more about the purpose of life. And another thing is Vyakulata, that is said by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He said, an intense desire to know God will come in you. With the grace of God, for that also you need the grace of God. To know about God, you need the grace of God. And to the intense desire to see God, that Vyakulata, again there has to be grace. For everything there has to be grace. So ultimately, for the purpose of moksha, you need the grace of an avatara to come and this is one more reason why an avatara is born, because a jiva has the ego, right? See, this is the story of Jaya and Vijaya. And there was the fourth Sanat Kumara brother, the sages Sanat, the four sages who went to Vaikunta to see Lord Vishnu. And this Jaya and Vijaya, who are demigods, they are not enlightened or anything. They are just gatekeepers to Vaikunta. They didn't let them in, and we know the story how they were cursed by the sage, and Vishnu told them, "You go be." They were cursed to be born on earth, and Vishnu gave them the thing to say, "Okay, you go down as my enemy. I'll come and rescue you." See, God has made a promise to this ignorant jiva. I'm going to come and rescue you. So he has to be born, isn't it? So for 3 lifetimes of this Jaya and Vijaya, Vishnu had to take the avatar of 3 avatars, Rama, Krishna, and this Narasimha. And he had to be born because he had made a promise. So again, our Puranas are full of such stories where Rakshasa does some tapas, and God appears and gives him whatever tatastu he says, and the Rakshasa demon goes and abuses his boon, and again God has to calm down and to control him. So, because of the jiva's ego, the avatara has to be born, because he makes promises to the jiva. He has to come. That comes as that we come to the question: does the avatara has ego? Then there's a very interesting story. They connected with Swami Samartha Ramdas as far as this question is concerned. Does the avatara has ego? Because Bhagavad Gita chapter 10 is called the Vibhuti Yoga, in which Lord Krishna continuously, the whole chapter, he goes on telling Vibhuti is the opulence, the opulence of the absolute. He keeps on telling, I am the best. Among the eagles, I am Garuda. Among the Vedas, I am the Rig Veda. He is the best among everything. Whatever is on earth, on the manifest universe, I am the best among them. He keeps on giving examples. Among the sages, I am Narada. Like this. He goes on telling his powers. He goes on describing his own powers. So there's a little story associated with this beautiful Vibhuti Yoga. Once the Swami Samartha Ramdas, who is the sage from Pune, he was the guru of none other than Shivaji Maharaj. So this Samartha Ramdas, he was going through he was passing by a little village with a lot of his followers. And he passed by a hut where a man was thrashing his little boy. He was beating him. Say sorry to God, say sorry to God. What are you saying this about God? So this Samartha Ramdas stopped that man and said, why are you hitting your child like this? What did he do? So that man said, Maharaj, please forgive me. My boy, he was reciting the Gita, and he's telling me that Krishna has got a lot of ego. He's praising himself to the skies in this Vibhuti Yoga of Bhagavad Gita. He says, I am this, I am that. He keeps praising himself. So he's saying Krishna has got ego. So I'm very angry with him. A lot of papa will come. I'll get a lot of pap if this fellow goes on saying like this. So I'm asking him to shut up. So Samartha Ramdas said, wait, stop hitting your child, number one, and send him with me. I will take him with me to my ashram, and then I will tell him the way it has to be told. You please stop hitting him in the first place. So the man is very happy to let the child go, and Swamiji brings the child to his ashram and gives him, trains him, in all sorts of work. And so the child grows up to be a strapping young man, a very strong-bodied, able-bodied man. And so again, on one more occasion, Ramdas is going on with his entourage on a Padayatra, and on the street in front of him, a big boulder is lying in front of him. So Ramdas calls this boy and says, "Look, there's a boulder. I cannot cross. Can you shift the boulder? And so that we can all pass." So the boy said, "Yes, okay, I will shift it." And he lifted the boulder and he rolled it to the side. Then Samartha Ramdas said, "You shifted the boulder so easily. How did you do it?" So the boy says, "I was able to do. I'm strong, so I was able to lift it and put it away." So Ramdas said, Was this your ego which said you are strong, or were you just stating a fact that you are strong? The boy said, no, no, no ego. I have learned that, humility is what first thing I have learned from you, Swamiji. I'm just stating a fact that I'm strong. That's why you asked me, right? Because I'm able to do it, you asked me. So I'm strong. So it's just a statement of fact. Then Samartha Ramdas Swamiji tells that boy, similarly, Lord Krishna, when he says that I am so and so, I am so and so, I am this, I am that, he's just stating a fact because you don't know. Unless he tells us, how will we know? Who else can tell us about the abilities of Krishna? Krishna himself has to know who is greater than him. Somebody else cannot tell us. No. So Krishna is just stating a fact. That's all. So that was just an aside, interesting story about, does Avatara has the ego? Of course not. Avatara does not have ego. Um, does Avatara has karma? Again, why do we even ask this question? Because it looks as if he has got karma. Because when the Avatara comes down on earth, like any other person, he goes through a lot of things in life, all the miseries, everything. He loses his wife, he has to fight demons, he has to, he's sent away to a forest. His karma is not any less than any other, one of us, like a jiva. He appears to go through karma, but while there's a very, very subtle difference between the actions of an avatara and the life of an avatar and the life of a jiva. While a jiva seeks ananda or happiness, all the actions of a jiva are for selfish reasons. For his own happiness, he does that. But an avatara acts out of happiness. What do you mean? Rama was very happy to go losing his wife or his kingdom and go kill Ravana. No, not like that. His actions are of free will. He came down on earth as an avatar to rid the world of Ravana. So whatever he had to do in that process, he had to do. See, while he was acting, all the actions of an avatara are called as Leela. Leela means a play. It looks as if the avatara is having a lot of agony, going through a lot of trauma, getting into a lot of trouble, but it's all a play. For an avatar, for us, it's very, very real. When we go through problems in life, for us, it's very, very real. But for an avatara, it is all a drama which is happening. It's a leela. So an avatara's life is called as a leela, not ours. Ours is not a leela. It is very, very much real, right? So an avatara is acting out of free will, and while is the leela of going through the trauma, is liberating so many souls. Just take the story of Rama. How many souls he liberated throughout his life? Ahalya, Shabari, that little squirrel, whatever. So many. I mean, the replete. Krishna's life and Rama's life are replete with stories. Even the stories of great Mahatmas are replete with stories of how people have been liberated in the presence of an avatara, isn't it? So the avatara, of course, does not have ego and does not have karma, and the life of an avatara is called a leela. And so, is an avatara omniscient? Again, we take refuge in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 5, which says, Bhagavan, what did the Bhagavan say? Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tava Arjuna. He says, both you and I have had many births, O Arjuna. Tanyaham veda sarvani natvam veta parantapa. While you have forgotten them, I remember them all, O Parantapa. Okay? Why does Krishna say this? Because in the beginning of this Jnana Yoga, chapter of Jnana Yoga, chapter 4, Krishna says, what I'm telling you, Arjuna, I have told before to Vivaswan, to the sun god I have told. From the sun god it has come down, and again now I'm telling you. And so Arjuna asks, look, you're here in front of me right now. I'm hearing you now. What do you mean you told me? You told somebody earlier. I'm seeing you here now. You are here now. Where were you earlier? How were you earlier? for which the Lord Krishna says, you don't know, you don't remember how many times you are born and you are dead. You don't remember your past lives and karmas, but I do. I remember everything that has happened to you earlier, that will happen to you later. Not just you, I know what's going to happen at all times, because I am the knowing principle itself, I'm the Chit. I'm the knowing principle. I'm omniscient. As an avatara, I know exactly what's happening. As Chit, I'm the general knowing principle, but as an avatara, I know exactly what's going on with everybody's life. So yes, an avatar is omniscient, not just omniscient, avatar is omnipotent as well, and omnipresent. So omnipotent, we have seen how the Sudarshana Chakra goes from Krishna's hand, or the magical powers that Rama's bow, and even Arjuna. See, even the Pandavas were Amshas, right? Amshas of all these gods, Varuna, Indra, all these gods. And the Amshas also had so many powers. They had such omnipotent powers, magical weapons and the powers they had. So yes, the omniscient avatara is definitely omniscient. Now, it's already time. So why is an avatara born? Because to liberate seekers from the cycle of birth. So first we talked about how an avatara takes us through dharma, artha, and kama, gives us the guidelines. But this is the real purpose. The main purpose of human birth and the birth of an avatara is to liberate seekers from the cycle of birth and death. How? Through the Shrutis and Puranas, the Veda Matas. The knowledge of the Vedas has come down from Veda Vyasa himself, who is none other than another avatar of Vishnu, right? Vyasaya Vishnu Rupaya Vyasa Rupaya Vishnave. Namo vai Brahma Nidhaye Vasisthaya Namo Namaha. So, sage Vyasa, there are two births that Vishnu took during the same time. One as Krishna to guide in the material plane, to guide the Dharma, Artha and Kama to the people, to Arjuna and the Pandavas and the world. And then the other was as Vyasa, who established a system of pedagogy, a system of teaching of the Vedas and the Upanishads through the 108 Upanishads and the 18 Puranas. He codified the Upanishads and he wrote the Puranas. The Puranas in the form of stories are told in every house, in a household. That is how the essence of the Vedas are preserved in the form of stories through the ages. This is how God, the avatar of Vyasa, ensured that the knowledge in the Vedas and Puranas are passed down through generations. That is leading to moksha, right? So how is this? It is done through the Guru Parampara. So this is a very famous sloka, Narayana or Sadashiva Samarambha, Shankaracharya. It is said that from Narayana or Sadashiva, depending on what Siddhanta you follow, Vaishnava or Shaiva, Advaita or Vaishnava. So Dvaita or Advaita, Sadashiva, and that knowledge was given to Brahma, the creator of the universe, who in turn gave it to Vasishtha, and Vasishtha gave it to Mahashakti, the Maya, Mahamaya, and Mahamaya gave it to Parashara, and from which Parashara gave it to Vyasa, who gave it to Shuka. Then it came to Gaudapada and to Shankara, and from Shankara, the lineage of the Shankara, the Padmapada and all these people, it has come through Asmadacharya Paryantam. Our own personal gurus it has flown like this through the Guru Parampara. It's nothing but an avatara. The avatara, all these people have taken avataras to bring us the knowledge. So from Gaudapada on, human forms. Before Gaudapada, they're all in subtle forms, it can be said. So these are all the Guru Paramparas. So they all came for Dharma Samsthapana. Shankaracharya is the avatar of Shiva, it is said. Ramanuja is the avatar of Adishesha. Madhva is the avatar of Hanuman. Ramakrishna is the avatar of Rama and Krishna himself. And Ramana Maharshi is also an Arunachala Shiva, right? And so this is just a, I'm not including everybody here, just to say that all these great divine souls have come down to give us the messages of the Vedas and the Upanishads and liberate us from the cycle of birth and death. So what are they doing? How are they doing? They're spreading their grace through giving us jnana and generating bhakti within us. Without grace, without their influence in our life, there is no way we can get either jnana or bhakti, either jignasu or vyakulata, right? So you have heard this phrase, Nanak Naam Jahaj hai. Why are these special avatars? Why should they be born? Because a jahaj is a huge ship. You can you can cross the ocean by yourself. There are a lot of spiritual seekers who are enlightened quietly by themselves. They can float across like a twig on the water, says Ramakrishna, but they cannot. Even if a crow sits on the twig, it will sink. So the twig can go only by itself. But if such an avatara comes, it's a jahaj, it's a ship. Sitting on the ship, hundreds of people can cross the ocean of samsara. That is why an avatara is born. That is why all these jnanis are born. To take us, Nanak Naam hi jahaj hai. Take the word of Nanak, the Guru Nanak, and that is the ship. You sit on the ship, you sit in the teachings of these avatars, this grace of these avatars, and you are crossing the ocean of samsara. So what happens after an avatara unmanifests? The bodies of avatars are not destroyed, and the form of an avatara lives on. How they're enshrined in samadhis, shrines, and in ashrams and temples and pilgrimage destinations, tirtha kshetras and punya kshetras. Why? Because their grace is always present, and their forms are worshipped, their pictures, their idols, their sculptures, and the grace in the way they live, the Vrindavan, the Mathura, Ayodhya, all these places, Tiruvannamalai, these places are holy. Dakshineshwar, they're very, very holy places because they walk the earth. They don't die, they just unmanifest, that's all, but their grace is always present. And we should not dismiss the general religion, because this is the superstructure of religion on which spirituality rests. Without these basic foundations of these punya kshetras or the temples or the rituals or the pujas that you do, that's the basic foundation on which, without that, it's out of nothing, it's not possible. So we need all this. The superstructure of religion has to be intact for us to get into the higher purpose of life. So to conclude, a jiva is born out of bondage and an avatara is born out of freedom. And a jiva acts out of bondage and an avatara acts out of bliss and free will. And a jiva's purpose is dharma, artha, kama, moksha, to get the chaturvida purusharthas of life. And avatara's purpose is to help us with the above agendas we have, and to establish or re-establish religion and spirituality. And with grace, the jiva's purpose is upgraded to, with the grace of the avatara, with the grace of the Sadguru, the jiva realizes that his purpose in life is Atmano Mokshartham and Jagat Hitaya Cha. That means I have been born here, of course, number one, to exhaust my prarabdha karma, but while doing so, I have to uplift myself. I have to find liberation, salvation for myself. Atmano Mokshartham. Why? What is my body for? It is for service of the world, welfare of the world, Jagat Hitaya Cha. So for myself, liberation. For the world, service. This is the agenda. This is my life's agenda. This is realized by the jiva with the grace of the Guru, who is none other than Avatara. Why? Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu. Who else is the Sadguru apart from the Avatara? Isn't it? So this is the glory and the magnificence and the mystic of the Avatar. Thank you so much.